Greetings, and welcome all to Digital Undivided's Diane Dinners. Diane Dinners is named after Digital Undivided's Project Diane report, the first ever research study to quantify the entrepreneurial experience of women of color founded startups in the United States. Since the inaugural release of the Project Diane report, Digital Undivided has documented the experiences of the founders on their startup journey, sparked a national dialogue about inclusive innovation, and even brought partners in the startup ecosystem together to discuss issues and co-create solutions. Diane Dinners allows us to have a broader reach for viewers at home as we bring together industry leaders to drive conversation about the challenges our Latina and Black women founders face within the ecosystem. Our goal is to elevate these issues to promote understanding and focus our collective efforts on scalable solutions. Now, you'll hear from some captivating and inspiring industry leaders and entrepreneurs who are innovating new industries, including Shannon Morales, founder of Trabaja, a talent marketplace and community for undersupported tech talent. Charlotte Newman, global head of underrepresented founders at Amazon Web Services. Erica Dijkman, general partner at Rain Ventures, a seed-stage consumer technology and software startups firm. Natasha Benskapal, co-founder and chief operating officer at Vega X Holding, an index-driven crypto asset management platform. During tonight's conversation, we will address the intersecting constraints experienced by women of color in the investment and startup space, the initiatives and programs designed to address the lack of diversity in tech, valuations, and more. So let's get into it.
Margaret?
Shannon, Natasha, let's talk about building investor relationships. For founders raising money, what are some of the insights that you've learned in your journey about how to build those relationships, and what should they really understand?
I think the first thing is understanding that this is a game of endurance. The first is that you will get many no's. I think that's kind of the reality of the situation. We're all very hopeful, I think, when we start in this, like, we're going to get to yes, and you will get there. But the reality is you're probably going to have to kiss a few frogs before you get to that point, right? And I think that there are going to be a lot of meetings that you have to do follow-ups, and you have to do a lot of work. You're doing a lot of hand-holding to really sell your passion and your idea to someone to invest in you. So I think number one is that it's a long game, that you're going to be doing this for some time. And also this world where it may never really end. You're kind of almost always worried about capital and raising capital and capital for your business. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I think that's important is that to be very real about both your metrics in the business and your strengths as an entrepreneur. Because as you are talking to people about your idea and trying to get them to also have conviction in your idea and invest in you, it's going to be very clear to them where you may excel and what your strengths may be. And if it's not clear to them, that's part of your job. And it's important for us to be realistic, I think, with ourselves as entrepreneurs, to understand where we stand on any kind of skill spectrum, or where we feel very strong in our abilities and where we can lean on others for support and help. And I think that that's a key thing, figuring out where you can get support from others and how you can use that as a tool and a skill set, because it's important to very recognize that even though you are wearing many hats, it's not expected that you are the expert hat wearer everywhere, right? But it is anticipated that you as the leader will be able to identify other folks to wear those hats for you. And I think that's an important realistic check-in that's needed for entrepreneurs, especially when raising capital.
And I think most founders who have raised will tell you to cast a wide net, that you should reach out to a lot of investors. For me, my experience was a little different. I wanted to be really intentional about who I selected to have conversations with. I mean, I run a business. I also have 3 kids. My time is limited, just like investors' time is also limited. So I wanted to be very selective and intentional about which investors I wanted to have those conversations with and which ones were actually going to understand what we were building within Trabaja. I think as founders, if you have a really amazing business that you're scaling, it's profitable, then, take your time and select the investors that you actually want to build those relationships with. Additionally, they say, I think it's 7 years is like the estimated time of that relationship that you have with that investor. So for me, some of my relationships don't even last 7 years. So I didn't know if I wanted to, be in the mix or have that investor in the mix with me for 7 years. That's a very long time. And so just take your time, vet investors out the same way they're going to vet you out as a founder, and really just be intentional, be selective, and take your time. If you need that infusion of capital, there are alternative routes, and so don't feel rushed or pressured from anybody, not founders, not investors, to take capital. If you are revenue generating, then think about how you can kind of expand that runway and find other ways to make income.
Yeah, most of our founders think they don't have a choice, right? They're just happy to be chosen. And I think shifting that mindset, what I hear from the both of you is there's an opportunity to do that in a way that is going to serve their business.
Yeah.
Now, we have the founder perspective. Erica, I'm coming to you. For the investor perspective, what do you suggest founders understand to ensure their success in this space?
Do you mean with fundraising?
Yes.
I think that the most important thing for founders to understand is that, if you're talking to VCs, our job is to make money, right? We're here to 3 to 10x the capital that our LPs give to us. And so that is what we have to be motivated by, right? So rather than, presenting the investment opportunity as an opportunity for us to help you, I would really come from the mindset as to how are you presenting this as an opportunity for me to have the privilege of making money through this amazing idea that you've come up with and the hard work that you're doing. And I think that successful founders always present things from that angle. So it's very rare for an investor to want to invest in a company if they don't feel at least some, I always say like the little feeling of greed, right? Like, oh my gosh, if I let this one go by, I could be missing out on tens of millions of dollars. So you want to make sure that the investor walks away with that sentiment, not like, oh, hey, poor me, no one's giving me money, I need money because I need this, need. No, it's what am I giving you, right? If you give me this money, I know how to spin gold out of straw. I can 10x your money. I can 20x. I can 100x your money. So, really sort of understanding how to align the financial product you're offering, which is the investment, to the investor, and separating that from your business, right? Your business has multiple stakeholders, just in the same way that the employees who want a job at your company have different motivations than the clients who want to use your product and service have different motivations as the investors. So really be very thoughtful as to what the investors' motivations are. Maybe practice with some other investors who maybe are not in your target space, but can give you good feedback. And, once you've sort of had a chance to probably practice and learn how to handle getting a no, maybe 10 to 15 times, you'll be in a really good position. You mentioned something before about resilience.
Yes.
The other thing I think that's really important for people to remember is that as VCs, we only invest in about 0.2% of the companies that we see. So if you get rejected by 100 different firms, like you're actually not failing. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people to accept. And, we've actually seen too that very often with female founders and with founders of color, there can be a sense of frustration, that can come through. So what I always tell people is, you need to go into these meetings like you are Chad from, Delta Sigma Nu or whatever it is, right? So I think that's actually the sorority from Legally Blonde, but Sigma Nu, right? Regular Sigma Nu. You have to go into every meeting with that confidence. And even if you get rejected, you have to take the attitude that, hey, this is your loss, or maybe it's just not a fit, or to realize that a no is not always a no. Sometimes it's a not now. So even if you have investors that have said, hey, this isn't a fit for us right now, keep them posted on your monthly updates. One of the things that founders don't realize as well is that as investors, we obviously want to help you, but we are always motivated to kind of wait until the last possible minute to actually make the investment, right? And that requires you having some sort of inflection point in your traction. So if, as you're telling a story, a great way to elicit that sort of greed response out of an investor and maybe get them more motivated to do your round is to show them that there's a significant inflection point that is just about to happen in your business. And if they wait too long, they're going to miss the boat.
We actually teach founders a framework for pitching investors. It's called Pitching Better. And it's based on research by a professor, Dr. Wong, that underrepresented founders often get more risk-based questions. And how you respond to risk-based questions in moments that invite more risk, let's say, into your pitch is really important. So we teach founders to respond factually, but then to promote themselves. So what often is missing, I think you talked a little bit about this, Natasha, is that like for Black and Latinx women, sometimes it may not come as natural to enter the room and have that sort of bravado and approach it from the perspective of like, yeah, you would be missing out if you didn't put money into this startup, right? That may not feel as natural, but it's really important that founders look for opportunities whenever they're pitching an investor to create those moments of FOMO. Going back to what Erica was saying. And there's actually good research that indicates that if you are able to do this, if you're able to create promotional opportunities out of moments of like maybe more risk in a pitch, that actually leads to better fundraising outcomes.
Yeah, we have a phenomenal community workshop that we've done in partnership with AWS, where we've focused on teaching founders how to address the promotion questions versus the prevention questions, right? And knowing the difference between the two. So from a founder's perspective, how have you built up your tolerance and your resilience in the face of hearing the word no?
I'll go first. Heard no a lot, so sure, I'll be the first one to hop in. So I think you in the crypto world, we call this thing called diamond hands, which means that you kind of like you just build up this callous and this resistance from holding crypto for so long. Is where the nuance comes from. And I think as an entrepreneur and a female entrepreneur, you also develop that thick skin is probably the better term for it. And I think that part of it is trying to understand where the place of no comes from. Because to Erica's point, there could be very clear reasons where we literally cannot invest in this kind of business, but we're interested in this, and maybe in the future we can do that kind of thing. But if you aren't keeping in touch with that person or that firm, you won't really necessarily know. So I think that there's a lot to be said for being able to understand where a no comes from, or also to have the courage to ask why, so that you can figure out if it's something in your pitch. Is it a metric that you're not showing? Is there something else that you need to showcase or communicate that could change that no to a yes? Or that might be useful information for any future pitches that you may have to kind of immediately get a yes or immediately get another conversation. So I think that those kind of things like it makes it easier for you to take these no's if you take it from a place of learning and development and figure out how to put your best foot forward. And again, I think it's this expectation of knowing you're going to get no's. I would also like to say that as female entrepreneurs and Black female entrepreneurs, we've probably been at the top of our ranks of a lot of things throughout our lives. So when you get that no, it almost feels like disheartening, and it almost feels like a personal attack to a degree. And then you continue to get no's, and then you wonder why you chose this field of business, or why you made this decision, right? But I think that a lot of it is resting in, the passion and the reasons for why you were building in, to kind of bring you back to this place of foundation that gives you, I think, the motivation and drive to keep going, and making sure that you hold on to that. Because I think when you're able to match your passion with what you're doing, it becomes very evident to both investors and anyone you talk to as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you don't have to fake that. And I think that investors can tell that as well. So being prepared in those elements, I think, will go a very long way.
Shannon.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And it's funny because I actually didn't receive a lot of no's. That's why I was like, let me think about this for a minute. Because like I mentioned, I think, yeah, humble brag. But I think it was because, out of when people say, okay, reach out to 100 folks, I think I reached out to maybe 5 to 10. And that was enough for me. And so most folks didn't say no. They just said, I just need to see something additional in your traction to make me feel a little bit more confident in investing in you. And I think that's just a testament to why I took so long and choosing the investors that I wanted to have those introductory calls with. So I chose staffing agencies that had maybe an investment arm because they understood the talent acquisition, the hiring, the workforce development. I also chose investors that had some type of social impact mission. So they understood, why I'm focusing specifically on professionals of color or on the working class. And so for me, I think whenever I did hear a no or not now, I wanted to understand a little bit more behind that. Like, is it the company? Is it the business? Is it me? What am I giving off that's, making you say no, right? Or not right now. And so I took that and I learned from it to be able to apply it to the business and make it stronger for when I actually do reach out to that investor again.
Mm. Okay, so this kind of dovetails back to what you were saying, Erica, kind of about making it enticing and exciting from the perspective of an investor. Do you have any other tips in addition to what Natasha and Shannon have shared with us in terms of how our founders can better prepare themselves and what they should be thinking or doing during this time?
Yeah, sure. So, the first thing I would say is that being in a pitch meeting is actually a really stressful situation. And I think it's kind of funny because, some founders are better at it than others. I've definitely seen some pitch meetings where things just like absolutely went off the rails with emotion. So what you want to do is you want to practice enough to really like condition yourself to experiencing those emotions. And although that takes a lot of time and energy and is well worth the investment, there is one simple hack that I always tell founders that works every time and should always be used, especially if you're doing some sort of a pitch that's more in public, is no matter how offensive the question you have been asked is, always start your response with, you know what, that's a really great question. And if you just say that, it's going to sort of put you in a frame of mind of not possibly being able to sort of be snarky or get upset or get offended. And you'll be able to actually handle it with grace and charm and be successful. I would say, the second most important piece of advice, and, Shannon talked a little bit about this in her journey story, is to really figure out which investors are truly most aligned with your stage, with your sector, with your mission. Which partners might consider this sort of like a personal interest of theirs and be really excited to go on that decade-long partnership with you. When you can really refine who those few people are, what I would advise that you do is that you first practice on some other people who maybe aren't those like ideal targets so that you can kind of get into your groove. You can figure out what sort of questions are going to be asked. You can figure out the best responses. And then for those select few that you think are maybe going to be your ideal fit, try to get a warm introduction. There's always 6 degrees of separation to almost anybody. And if you can't get a warm introduction, make sure that you reach out with an email that is really, truly personalized to that investor and their personal interests. And you'll probably be successful.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. Okay, start with, that's a really great question.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so we have that tip. Charlotte, we know that anytime there's an economic downturn, Latina and Black women are the first to feel the impact. What solutions are your company, AWS, and of course, Erica, the same question to you. What are you doing to really kind of address this situation?
Great question. A number of things.
That's a
You
great
right.
question.
Now we know how she was.
Well done.
Right,
Um, so a number of things. One of the programs that we have is called Fundraising Lab, and it is designed to take founders through every stage of the fundraising process, going from just the points that have already been made about how do you reach out to investors? Like, what should that initial note look like? Do you send a teaser deck? Answering those questions that often founders can't ask or don't want to ask investors, but have, all the way through to what I was describing around pitching better and navigating fundraising bias and helping founders understand how to answer questions factually, but then promote themselves, to understanding cap tables, venture math, Because one of the things that founders absolutely have to do is to do their homework in this environment. You need to know the investor that you're pitching. You need to come into the room like fully prepared, right? So we want to make sure that founders are prepared. That's number one. Then we have accelerator program that we launched called the Impact Accelerator Program. And through the Impact Accelerator, founders are able to go through 12 weeks where they go into all the aspects that you would need to get to not only to be investor ready, but to ensure that you have product market fit, that you really understand your customer. And through that program, you get $100,000 in AWS credits, as well as a non-dilutive investment from AWS. And in addition to kind of the Impact Accelerator program and the fundraising lab, we also just make sure that we have programs that answer all of the questions that founders say that they really care the most about or that really matter in their journey, whether that's hiring or understanding how to really close sales. We have a huge sales force, and we leverage them to teach founders how to really go after B2B customers in particular. So on top of that, one of the exciting things that we've done at Amazon is we've launched a fund of funds. And so in this environment, we thought it was really critical to ensure that there was more capital in the market, right? And we don't make direct investments, but we do invest in VCs that we believe ultimately get capital in the hands of underrepresented founders. And so those are a few of the things amongst others. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How does this sound to our founders? And Natasha, I'll start with you. We've heard from the investment side, we've heard from the corporate side. So I'm curious to know, are there any additional solutions that you would like to see in this space?
Short answer is yes. There are always solutions. I think they all boil down to capital, especially in this world of fintech and digital assets. As I said, it's a very capital intensive business, but all founders need capital. So I think that that's kind of needed. And I think on the Black female founder side, it's dollars and networks. Those are the two things that always come down to funding and communities. And I think that's extremely important for a number of reasons that we already discussed. But the first is, in terms of funding, really putting the money where their mouth is. There are a lot of organizations that are talking about funding female founders and Black female founders, but we haven't necessarily seen the dollars actually materialize. So I think, one, having programs that actually do allocate those dollars and track that impact and are able to then communicate what that outcome is, I think will be extremely important. And then more communities. I think that, like I said, I'm very encouraged by the number of communities that have popped up since I've become an entrepreneur. This was not a real thing 10 years ago. Even 5 years ago, you didn't have the number of communities that there are now for women founders and then women of color founders. So I think the more that some of these communities and programs pop up, especially like what Digital Undivided is trying to do and what a lot of other corporates are also trying to fund and back up, are how do we create these micro communities where folks are really supportive of each other, and from that they decide what services they need. And I think that that is a little micro trend, and the micro community building trend is something that I think is going to be especially beneficial for Black female founders moving forward.
Absolutely. And given the time it's going to take to address the solution, a long-lasting trend, we should hope, you know? Shannon, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say I second everything that Natasha said, but I'll add one more thing, which is education. I think there's not enough education around how to raise, and when you're actually going after that raise, what to look for, what are some red flags that you should know about. Very often you kind of get thrown into this pool of sharks and you're trying to swim and catch your breath and get your way to the top. But there should be more support for professionals like us who really don't know, because we're not around, that environment often enough to be able to understand what is happening, and what even terminology sometimes, are we pre-seed, are we seed? And that can be very overwhelming. And when you're trying to run a business, you often have to take your focus away from the business just to focus on the fundraise. And so there needs to be more education and more support centered around helping professionals just understand what that looks like.
Okay, so Natasha, you said it, right? Money talks, and really what comes down to it is this pursuit of capital that the founders here are watching. So Erica, when we're talking about Latina and Black women and perhaps the ways that they can become more investable, what are some of those key considerations that we can have for them?
Yeah, this is really important to know before you go out into the market. And at the end of the day, the key investment criteria are the same for Black and Latina founders and female founders as they are for all founders. And some of the most important ones, at least what we consider to be most important at Rain Ventures, is number one, founder market fit. So why is this team uniquely and ideally suited to execute on this business plan? Number two, we're looking for evidence of product market fit. What makes you believe that the market actually wants and needs and is willing to pay for your product? So have some good evidence of that, whatever it might be, whether it's actual sales or surveys you've done or customer interviews that you've done. Number three, we're looking for scalability, right? How are you going to make $1 out of 15 cents and do that 100 million times? So we want to see not only that you have a system for making money efficiently, but that there's a deep pool of customers that you can actually interact with. And our target is that the startup needs to have a plan to get to at least $50 million in revenue within the first 5 years. That's a figure that a lot of founders aren't really aware of. And we're hoping that they're going to be able to do it on less than $50 million in total capital. I'd say that would be back in the boom days. Now we're hoping you can do it on maybe less than $25 million in total capital. And lastly, we do want to see that you have amazing leadership skills. So show the investor not only that you've got a great idea and you've got a great product, but that you are the person to build and lead potentially $1 billion company.
Okay, and that concludes this Diane Dinners series. Thank you to all of our guests for their time and insights this evening. I know many current and budding entrepreneurs, investors, and organizations are going to benefit from your experience, wisdom, and passion for this cause. We also want to thank our sponsors for this event and our Digital Undivided partners for helping us co-create scalable solutions supporting the growth and success of Latina and Black women entrepreneurs in the startup space.
For more information on Project Diane, visit digitalundivided.com/Project Diane.